Welcome to Business Insight Fredericton. I'm Krista Ross, CEO of the Fredericton Chamber of Commerce, and today we're talking to Jeff Alpaugh, owner of Jeff Alpaugh Custom.
This shirt is actually fairly bang on for the shoulder line. Right where we want it is where the planes change.
So Jeff, tell us a bit about your business. What do you do?
We do custom clothing, right? We do everything from our iconic dangerous dress shirts, which are these sort of bold pattern, very striking, very powerful shirts, to your workaday business suits, and we're really well known for our wedding attire, right? So we're custom in the sizing, that's sort of the base of the pyramid, but then we're also custom in the sense that we hear you out. What are you trying to achieve with your look, with your outfit, with your persona? And either you know how you're going to solve that with clothing, or you trust us, and then we help you build something totally custom for yourself.
It's not just for men?
There's not really a limitation in terms of gender. It's more about body size, measuring the body size, measuring the body shape, and then creating something that expresses sort of the wusta of the individual, whatever that may be.
Tell me how you got started in this business.
19 years old, and I was in business school, and I was in a co-op program. And part of the co-op program is you study one semester, you work the other semester in the field of business administration. It's a wide field, but part of that process is you have to get your own job. That's not something the university just hands to you. And so like any job, you apply, you do interviews, and then you do the work. And that's when, you know, the real fun begins. Well, for me, I went to the store, I bought a suit that was about 5 sizes too big for me. I was 145 pounds. At the age of 19, I bought a suit for someone who's about 230 pounds, and I went to these job interviews looking very foolish. And so nobody hired me because their lizard brain was like, idiot, idiot, idiot. And there was nothing I was going to say that was going to get past that. And luckily, some people made some jokes at my expense, which allowed me to clue into the fact that I was wearing clothing far too large. And I actually went and sought employment at a clothing store in order that I learn how to dress professionally. Though I looked terrible for that job interview as well, they hired me. They put a suit on me that looked fantastic, in my opinion. It fit great. I looked in the mirror, I saw 007, and it built this confidence in me that, interestingly enough, it didn't just help me get a job, which it did, so that I could stay in the business co-op program. It also made me a more desirable teammate in group work in the business program. And so I found it helped me professionally and socially right off the bat, learning to dress well, and then I felt this desire to convince others of the same and then teach them how to dress as well, and it just became a lot of fun for me. So JAC really started from me solving a series of problems for myself. The first problem was dressing in a way to simply fit in, right? Okay, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I've dressed to fit in, right? Pyramid plank 1 solved. Then my next one was, okay, how do I fit to stand out in a positive way?
Tell me a bit, Jeff, about your background.
The short story is, went to business school, wanted to be an entrepreneur one day, got a little derailed because the September 11th Twin Towers incident happened when I was in grade 11. The Afghanistan campaign was still going on when I was in university. So at the end of university, I enlisted in the military, feeling that I didn't want to tell my children that I wasn't part of this conflict. That's sort of going to probably define that period of my life. But while I was in university, I worked at Moore's. And after university, while I was waiting to get into the Army, I worked at Harry Rosen. And I got a lot of great training and learned about the clothing business from those experiences at such a young age. And I really enjoyed the sort of positive transformation I was seeing in people who bought clothes from us. And, in the Army, I had a lot of time to walk around the woods at night and think about how I might start my own clothing company and take all the good stuff, but add a little bit of my own magic. And, one day I thought it was time to do that.
So how long have you been in business?
7 years, or close to 7 years.
Lucky number 7. That's awesome.
That's right, yeah. We started January 2016, and here we are closing in almost at 2023.
So tell me about the structure of the business. Is it just you, or what does your team look like?
So there's 7 of us, and there's a store team here in Fredericton. There's a store team at our Waterloo store, and then we have a CTO who essentially everything digital.
Jeff, what made you decide to open a second location, and how did you pick Waterloo?
I went to university at Wilfrid Laurier University in Waterloo, And so I had returned for a bit of a reunion, and I noticed that the town had changed completely. It had almost doubled in size. Some of these houses that I lived in when I was in university were like rundown student houses, and there were now these like epic condo buildings. And Google and Facebook, and everyone had their offices there, and it looked so good, and everyone was dressing in a way that I dress. And we were also seeing online success from Waterloo. And some of that was from very word of mouth. It was like guy who works in tech company in Fredericton meets guy who works in tech company in Waterloo at conference in Silicon Valley. I have to have that too, right? So there was this sort of like organic pull as well. And the final thing is I really do want to continue to infuse our brand with the tech community. It being a large population, it seemed like the right place to go for store two.
So you mentioned Dragon's Den. Tell me about that experience.
Like, it was not easy. We had to prepare sort of vigorously and consistently and constantly for it, both in terms of presentation, but also in terms of making sure the fundamentals of the business were actually sound so we could present them as such. And we put ourselves through some difficult scenarios. We visited an MBA class and gave our presentation there and had them sort of tear us apart the way the dragons would, which in actuality was more scary than going on the show Dragon's Den, because the dragons actually do want to be seduced and be with you, whereas the MBA students simply want to look smarter than you, and there's many of them, and it was quite the pressure cooker. Ultimately it was fun, and it was obviously fun to be victorious, and now, I mean, you're somebody who has introduced us to lots of different people. Probably one of the first things you say is, hey, watch this Dragon's Den video. It's 8 minutes long. If you get it, you'll get it. And if you don't, you won't. And it saves you having to explain who I am, what I'm about for 10 minutes. It'll do the work for you. And it's sort of an instant yes, no. It's the best business card I could ever have.
You talked a bit about your team, that you're a team of 7. You have a very unique business. You have very unique products. How do you find those unique individuals that are just right for your brand?
So, the marketing, the clothing, like people just kind of come to us. It's more about, filtering out and making the right hiring choices. But it's been fun lately where we do have a big enough team that you can see the diversity in it. And it makes me feel like if we can keep this going when we're 10 times or 100 times the size, it'll be something really special.
So explain to me, or define for me, who is your clientele?
A big one right now is people who are getting married. It's always a big one. In our particular day, it's massive because this past wedding season and the next one will both be fairly substantial, larger than usual, due to obviously the pandemic and the inability. So that's a massive client for us, is people who are getting married or have some type of event and they want to stand out, they want to look really elegant, and they want to be really special, and they want to feel special, they want their guests to feel special. That's a big one. And the other one are people who either dress up professionally or socially and want to stand out and want to make an impact.
So other than being a billboard of your beautiful products, how else do you get your brand out there? How do you promote?
So yeah, my favorite ways to promote are the more grassroots way. Of course, we use social media, right? We use Facebook and Instagram are our big ones. I've been not embracing them for a while, but this is something that you and I spoke about, and I think I'm going to get heavy into TikTok here. So we'll see how that goes. Then when it comes, we take our email marketing very seriously. For us, we're more of a, we bring people in slowly, but we keep people forever. Right? So our email marketing is sort of that exclusive messaging only to people who've already purchased before. That's actually where our most important communication is. But the other thing is I go to a lot of wedding shows, and I actually try to do that personally wherever possible. I will often fly into Ontario and do wedding shows there close to the Waterloo store, so the rest of the team doesn't, because I really enjoy meeting new people and all that stuff, right? Winning others over is something that I like to do. So I like wedding shows and advertising in very wedding specific magazines and those types of things.
So what about competition? Do you give much consideration or concern to your competition?
I don't really at a local level. I mean, I follow a lot of clothing brands on Instagram, as you can imagine. In fact, if you go on my Instagram, the only thing that you will see followed is clothing brands and clothing advertising, including, those would be my local competitors. I love seeing what other people are doing and staying on trend and that type of thing. At this point, I think I've got my own little niche. And in both cities, I tend to socialize with folks who are my competitors, even seek mentorship and advice from them.
So you've talked about your Waterloo store and ideas of getting bigger. What do you see as your growth trajectory?
Our two big pushes are online, and right now we're working on. So every clothing company does these virtual fittings since the pandemic, right? And for us, it was a mode of necessity. But we now do a lot of virtual fittings, and often with Americans, because for a time in 2021, we really had to advertise exclusively to Americans digitally because they were sort of going back to the office, going back to wedding season. So that's what we're hoping for on the online side. On the next store expansion side, I still have a lot of work in determining what is the next good location. But I have some cunning plans, which are too cunning to even mention in this interview. But when you see them, you'll be like, oh, that was cunning.
Okay.
Yeah. So we have big plans for a third store. And I think I've already got the perfect personnel to run it. Still have some market research stuff to work out.
TBA.
Location is TBA.
Jeff, tell me, so far in 7 years, what has been your biggest success?
So our biggest success has to be getting to the CanX. So for folks who don't know, the CanX is the store that is on every military base, right? So there's 28 CanXs across the country on 28 bases, and the military now has a lot more gender parity than it used to. And a few years ago, one of the generals visited me and said, Jeff, we have about a fifth of our members are female, and we're hoping to make it a full quarter. And yet we do not have clothes that are cut for females. As part of this initiative of actually welcoming females into the military, which is important to us, we want to provide clothes that are cut for females. We know that a lot of female senior officers are buying their mess shirts, their mess tuxedo shirts from you. Could you make a line that we can put in all of our stores across the country? And I, of course, said yes. And so we got that contract, and we're a big part in making women feel like when they went to mess events, they were actually dressed in a feminine and becoming manner. And that got such great feedback that we then got the contract for all of the tuxedo shirts and plain dress shirts, male and female, for all of the mess events and dress events in the military complete. And I was proud of it for the business success, but I was also proud of it for sort of the forward momentum for the military itself in its gender parity initiative.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah, thanks.
To have that kind of volume must be incredibly supportive for your business.
It is, right? It's something that it's sort of consistent and constant, and it's very cool. And now we actually provide these shirts that have it looks like a regular shirt when you have a jacket on, but they've got this crazy arms, crazy backs, wild patterns, and that's in the CanX too. And I do hope, I don't even mind saying out loud and on the record, I do hope one day to get the contract for the actual dress uniforms.
That's exciting. So you told me about your biggest success. Have you had any failures?
I think the most painful failures are COVID related, which I'm almost apt to not go into, because then someone say, well, are they failures or is it a bad hand? But I can assure you I've had failures that are completely my fault without a bad hand. But so with COVID, if folks don't know, we opened the Waterloo store 3 weeks before COVID hit. Put all our resources into it, both time and capital, and now we were in a big speed wobble. Folks who've been following along know that my wife and I designed this mask. The mask really took off, and next thing you know, that was great. Now, what I did and so 2020 wasn't so bad, but in 2021, you'll remember that a lot of people, now they were selling the black masks and bricks, and that kind of, and the whole idea of the mask kind of became, instead of a thick mask with a filter, it was I kind of want a thin mask that at least just gets me in the door. So our mask had less of a value proposition, and I had a bunch of folks on my team who are clothing people who have been mask people for almost a year now, right? And it's like, well, how am I going to sustain motivation and compete with, like, you know, these bricks of masks, right, of which even I have in my car. And so we thought that in 2021, the wedding season would be massive, like it was in 2022. And I stopped the masks earlier than I should have and really leaned into the 2021 wedding season. And then, as you know, there was a lot of, either in the Ontario store, things were locked down. And then here we were like in red, and like it maybe wasn't locked down, but there wasn't a lot of parties going on, and there certainly wasn't a lot of weddings going on. But we made a mask that said vaccinated on it. And it was exciting and cool, and everyone loved it. But the problem is that the landing page said vaccinated and COVID and pandemic so much, and then there was a book now button, and Google thought that we were running a scam where we were booking people for fake vaccines. So we got our Google account and Facebook account shut down for 5 months. That was a very difficult time. Luckily, our mutual friend Jim Gilbert called a few friends and finally got my online advertising back, which allowed us to market to Americans and get out of.
So you mentioned during your commentary about the masks that you and your wife designed a mask. So you and your wife work together. Tell me how that works. I know you also have 2 very small children.
Yeah. You know, people ask about that all the time. Like, I really enjoy it. Em and I are very kind of like an attached at the hip couple, and that was something that people always sort of ascribed to us, even when we were a military couple. We've always been very like kind of filling each other's gaps, right? I'm, you know, high extrovert. She's a lot more detail oriented, and we are a little bit of yin yang like that. So we've always kind of enjoyed working together. And for me and for us as a couple, I think it's fun because it's a good dynamic.
Along the way, along the entrepreneurial journey that you've been taking, I'm sure there are organizations that have helped you. Tell me a little bit about that.
The ones I would start with first, a lot of the local ones like Planet Hatch, the Chamber of Commerce. So OMB has helped with making the introduction to certain programs.
So what about your team of professionals that you have around you, accountants, lawyers, finance people, those types of things? Have you found a local team of people that you trust with your business?
You know, those are critical relationships. I depend on them quite a bit. I work with them quite a bit. And I would suggest, like, if anyone's starting out, that is something that you want to do a lot of research in advance. And it's not necessarily something that you're going to be thinking about when you're super excited about your product or the market or the marketing ideas or whatever, but that is the foundation that will build a strong house in times where either there's a great opportunity or times where there's a great threat.
So how do you feel about the economy, the business environment, and the opportunities that we have here in New Brunswick?
Double-edged question, because, you know, you are reading a lot of negative things about recession and inflation, and, you know, you hope those aren't going to be as bad as what the worst case scenario is. But when it comes to us as a local, I think it's really great for our business because, you know, Fredericton itself is expanding. It's expanding quite a bit. The forecast is, you know, in 5 years, in 10 years, there'll be many more people. Given
that in your industry there have been some changes in terms of, you know, perhaps a more casual attire at work, those types of things, how do you feel that's going to impact your industry going forward?
You know, a clothing business that's highly geared towards the uniform, right, the suit as the uniform, may have some problems and may have to adapt and change a little bit. And the clothing that's a little bit more of like a high self-esteem item for people who already have high self-esteem and more of that dressing to stand out, I think is not going to be hit as much. The person who wants to dress to stand out, that person will always exist. And that person tends to come here. If you are geared more towards a work uniform and the work uniform is changing, then of course you're going to have to make some changes.
Sometimes we're lucky enough in our career to have a mentor. Have you been fortunate enough to have a mentor in this business or in your professional career?
Yeah, I wouldn't say I have like one mentor who's like, I meet with this fellow once a week and but I feel like I have a lot of mentors. One thing that's helped with that is often the clientele that comes in here are business owners and therefore take an interest in the business and myself. So I've sort of de facto built a lot of relationships that are like a mentor-mentee relationship, because I feel very comfortable when I have questions calling them and seeking out the answers.
So we've talked about advice and mentors. What if you were going to give advice to someone who was thinking about launching their own business? What advice would you give them?
Well, I would give them probably the classic, like, just get started advice, because I will say, starting a business, it's a lot like jumping out of a plane. Like, the more you think about it, the more you can find reasons why you might not want to do it, right? And so what I would say to folks is, try to invest some amount of money that if you lost, you'd be okay, but give it a try, because it is very much, it's like riding a bike. It's hard to do it via a book.
Jeff, tell me what you are most proud of in this business.
So what I'm most proud of is the things that happen at the day-to-day level, is when somebody comes in or writes us an email and says, like, these are my wedding photos, use my wedding photos, I like, use them however you want, use them on your website, use them on your social media. Like, when people become such raving fans on a local, individual level that they want the business to blow up, that's what I'm most proud of.
So where do you expect to see your business a year from now, or 3 years from now, or 5 years from now?
In a year from now, we'll be at that, we'll know what the third store looks like. Unfortunately, like with the way COVID went and the way things are going, I do want some market conditions to calm down. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, I'd already have my third store and we'd be on the fourth store. But in a year from now, I think we know what the third store really looks like. And then the 18 months from now, that store is either up or it's like well on its way to being up. In 3 years, maybe that's 2 more stores. We'll have to see how that one does and how fast it develops traction. But the website is a lot more of a digitally interactive experience and we have far greater reach digitally advertising. We have a far greater online presence in the 3-year horizon.
One thing we haven't talked about today is your Jeff Alpaugh crazy socks. Tell me about that.
Glad you asked that question. So our socks, the world's most dangerous socks. So I'm really proud of this item. Our big thing is the sock of the month, right? Mm-hmm. This is really good. This is how we hook a lot of people in, because it's an inexpensive product. It allows people to buy a sock. Okay, if I like the sock, maybe I'll like everything else, as opposed to investing a lot of money in a dress shirt or a suit. These socks are, I designed them to be like a Lululemon product, right? Like, I wear them, I'm wearing one right now in my suit, I wear them with jeans, and I also wear them when I run and work out, right? They're very universal. It's the only sock people need. It's comfortable, it stays up, it's stylish. And if you join the sock of the month, you get a new one every month, and you get to see what crazy designs I'm coming up with in my head month to month, and people love that.
Jeff, thank you so much. It's been great to hear your story and the success of Jeff Alpaugh Custom.
Thank you.
We're always looking for great companies with a unique story to feature on the show. If you have suggestions, please get in touch with us.